If your listeners are thinking, what changed my habits or my viewpoint on something? It's not normally a big poster or a placard. They're still helpful as nudges and reminders, but often it's someone quietly having a word with you saying, I'm not sure what you said there was right, really, or that's a big statement. Where's that come from? Or are you sure that's completely true, what you've just said about all these types of people? It's often that our loved ones quietly saying something, or it's someone we admire and we see how they live out their values and we mirror them and we can see representation and go, oh, that is possible. It's often those quieter, more subtle actions that can have massive ripple effects. And that keeps me going.
Hello and welcome to the Liberated Woman Podcast, where my guests and I empower ambitious, mission-driven women like you to break free from toxic productivity and embrace a joyful, satisfying life. I'm your host, Tamu Thomas, author of Women Who Work Too Much, leadership coach and keynote speaker. In each episode, we explore personal and professional growth, featuring insightful conversations with inspiring guests, as well as episodes where I explore topics and answer your questions to support your growth and transformation. If you enjoy the show, please do like, subscribe, comment, rate, review, and share. The more listeners I reach, the more impactful guests I can attract to support your journey. Okay, let's begin. Hello, you wonderful people. Welcome back to another episode of the Liberated Woman Podcast with me, Tamu Thomas, and my wonderful guest, Sarah Corbett. Not just any Sarah Corbett, but Sarah P. Corbett. She is an award-winning activist, author, Ashoka fellow, born into an activist family in Everton, which is one of the most deprived wards in the UK, the fourth most deprived ward in the UK. She's a professional campaigner, most recently with Oxfam, and she founded the very wonderful Craftivist collective in 2009 to engage non-activists in influential, gentle practices to support activism. Now, Sarah has collaborated with all kinds of wonderful institutions, such as the Tate Museum, the V&A, work with WWF, World Wildlife Foundation. Hands up if you had your badge and you used to make your donations as a child. I was one of those people with a panda. And her work, right, this is what really, really turns me on. Her work has influenced lawmaking in the UK. And there are many things I admire and respect about Sarah's work, but something that really appeals to me as I am taking up space in my gentle era is the notion of gentle activism. Sarah, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here. And for people that haven't had the pleasure of coming into contact with you and your work, please could you tell us a little bit about you, what you do, and why you do it?
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me. I'll try and be short. So I run the Craftivist Collective, which is a social enterprise. It's global. Anyone can take part. And I provide books and kits and tools for people to have a go at craftivism, which is activism through handicraft. And my approach I call gentle protest. So some of the projects are issue specific and might support organizations and collaborate with them, like Fashion Revolution, the Climate Coalition, Bystander Revolution about bullying, all over the world. Some of the projects you can take part yourself in issues that you care about, whether it's local, national or international. And some of them is more about personal development. So before we preach to other people, are we practicing what we preach? Are we living our values? Are we being the change we wish to see in the world? And you use the process of the slow, repetitive, meditative form of hand embroidery and paper craft, all text-based, to help you slow down, calm down, and think more mindfully and critically about the complexities of social change and where you can be of most use to protest in an effective way that is gentle to yourself so you don't burn out, but also, and more difficult in lots of ways, it's to protest gently to power holders who you may be disagreeing with and be on completely different pages with, because the neuroscience and the psychology behind all of this is they won't engage with you with an open heart and an open mind if you throw milkshakes at them or scream and shout at each other. So it's strategic. It's not gentle as in passive or weak. It's very much about emotional intelligence, mindfulness, your health, the health of society, and the health of the power holders, so that you can protest in a way that's not polarizing, not divisive, but with always that goal of wanting to create a more beautiful, kind, and just world. That's my rambles. I'm not very good at short and succinct, Tammy, but there we go.
Sarah, you're going to learn what is a ramble with me, okay? That was succinct, that was powerful, and please don't worry about that. Do not worry about that with me, because my goodness, can I ramble? Can I ramble?
I love your rambles. They're always so wise.
So let's talk about, I was going to go to something that I started with and thought, no, because I have a tendency to be so like, oh my goodness, brain spark, let's go with that. Before I go over there, I want to know more about your background. So when I was reading about that, my connection with Everton was Everton football team in the 80s, because they were a really big team. I didn't know that about Everton. So could you tell us more about your history, your family, and taking up space in activism?
Yeah, I mean, we're all, whether we like it or not, we're all shaped by our background and our families and our loved ones and caregivers. And I grew up in West Everton in Liverpool. My dad has only just retired as the local vicar, and he's actually still the chaplain of the players and the staff at Everton Football Club, because most football clubs come out of churches in the UK. So it came out of his St. Peter's Church in Everton. So he's always had a link with the football club. So yes, Everton's very much part of the community, as well as, you know, wearing the badge of, I'm not really into football, but, you know, I have to pretend that they're my team. And my mum was a local nurse, and then community worker, and then became a local counsellor, sort of by accident, because no one else wanted to do it. She was quite shy, but extroverted. And then she ended up being a cabinet member for education and young people, and then deputy mayor of Liverpool City Council. And growing up in the 80s and the 90s in Everton as the vicar's kids, there's three of us. In Everton, there was lots of, I mean, people will know from the news in the UK, in Everton, we had lots of high unemployment, lots of houses, mouldy houses, which affected people's health. We didn't have a health centre. We didn't have fresh fruit and vegetables you could buy. You know, similar to a lot of complex needs that you have across the UK. And I could see inequality on my doorstep. You know, people would drive through Everton fast, but most people didn't have a car in Everton. And a lot of the activism meetings would happen in our back kitchen, because it was the vicarage. So we'd have people of all faiths and none, smoking like troopers, swearing like, you know, my parents would be swearing just as much as everyone else, and trying to do campaign strategies. And at the age of 3, there's a photograph of me squatting in social housing, local social housing, to save them from demolition. And we won them, and they're still there. And that's quite unusual. And although I couldn't remember it at the time, age 3, what was happening, growing up in that environment where we campaigned on lots of local issues, national issues. Aged 8, I went to South Africa in 91 for my dad's only sabbatical he took, where we were learning about the peace and reconciliation work happening there with Tutu and Mandela, and what we could learn and bring back to Everton and Liverpool. So I sort of grew up seeing that activism was needed, seeing that inequality and social injustice was happening, and that it's our responsibility and our right as human beings to support the most vulnerable and marginalized where possible, and be in solidarity, not sympathy. And the activism can work, but it's messy. So when I ended up working in activism, I campaigned at school and university and ended up working for big NGOs because I care about social change.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw that a lot of activism we were offering people was clicktivism, slacktivism, go on this big march, sign this petition, and not explaining the strengths of those actions, but how they fit other actions that are needed.
Yeah.
And I felt like we weren't being honest with people about, yes, sign that petition, go on that march, but also what power do you have in your constituency, or as a consumer, or as an employee or an employer, all of these different things. And as an introvert, I was burning out as an activist, and don't like conflict and quite highly sensitive. So I just would always be exhausted, and saw that craft could help me slow down, calm down, think critically, and then use the tool as ways to engage people, whether it's through small bits of street art that are below eye level for people to find rather than in people's faces, or giving gifts to power holders to build relationships with them. But my background in Everton, I've still got family and friends there. And I think for me, I left and I moved to London, which I'm sure lots of people will understand of when you're from a close-knit community that struggles, that comes with its own issues about leaving or not leaving and all of that stuff. But I always hold them close in my heart of, am I being in solidarity with my loved ones? Am I being of best use in the world for other communities as well? And where can I be of most use without burning out? And, all of the stuff you talk about, Tamu, about how do we bring joy to what we do? How do we not burn out? How do we help ourselves and others? And I think growing up in Everton, seeing the complexities of social change and how it's the nuance involved and how it's not just goodies versus baddies, and everyone has different skill sets and different contexts, sort of set me up to see how can I be an activist, but in this nuanced, gentle, respectful way that feels authentic to me and useful in the world. I'm rambling. Stop me.
You're not rambling. Please. I'm banning you from saying rambling anymore. It's what you're talking about. It's so beautiful. And it's really landing with me. So in my book, there's a part where I talk about that people who are oppressed, people who don't have access to finance and power, they have to use their bodies. They have to use their bodies in protest. And for me, as a Black woman who comes from a collective of people who were enslaved Africans on their way to the Americas, or people who were in the Americas and brought to Sierra Leone, Freetown, which is now the capital city of Sierra Leone, set up for that purpose, hence the name Freetown. I'm acutely aware of the ways my ancestors' bodies were weaponized, really, and were brutalized. And this is going to sound however it sounds. I am so resistant to protest because I'm like, there are other ways I can effect change. My ancestors didn't die for this. And also, as much as I am gregarious, outgoing, and all of that, I too am highly sensitive. I too get exhausted very, very quickly, especially because I lived in burnout for so long. For me, I am seeking alternative, impactful, creative ways to effect change. And I know that there are some people who judge that harshly and make the assumption that I'm not down for the cause or whatever. And that, you can think whatever you want. Like I know me. And I look at the activist landscape, the mental health is in the toilet. People are not able to function outside of their rage and their anger because the belief is that if you're raging against the machine, you need to be raging all the time. How can you possibly find joy when there's all this stuff going on? How can you possibly be seeking to make a living and have an impact when all of this stuff is going on? How can, like, all of these things? And I'm just like, there are other ways to do it.
Yeah.
And my observation is that the things we are protesting about, the things we are standing against, the change we want to make, the status quo we want to crumble, a lot of it is so abhorrent to our humanity, regardless of our background. Obviously, there's the intersectionality, and people of color, Black people have a much more amplified experience, but nobody benefits from these systems. And what I find is there is so much anger and rage that is righteous, but doesn't have a place to go. So then people start to use the oppressive ways of being to try to effect change, and it doesn't work. Now, don't get me wrong. I have vivid memories of my parents protesting. I have vivid memories about meetings, about the apartheid system in South Africa. My parents were very active in our community. There were lots of conversations about liberation, about social justice, etc. in my household. But I also know that we have to start looking at not maybe alternative or more grounded ways to be able to approach our activism, and also understand there's not one way to be an activist. Like, there's no room for liberal perfectionism.
100%. I agree 100%. And I always say that my gentle craftivism should be seen as one tool in the activism toolkit. It's not to replace other forms of activism. I still go on some marches if I think the marches have got a very tangible goal and is focused on policy, not personalities or people's hair color or, you know, the belittling stuff that could discredit your campaign. So I do go on some marches. I still sign petitions. Sometimes I buy shares in a company to be a shareholder activist. Sometimes I'll boycott a company. We need to see it as a spectrum and not a binary, this replaces that or this is the only way. And also, we are in such a complex world. I mean, Everton, when I grew up, was a very white working class area, and now it's much more culturally diverse because we had people from Syria move in, and it's very different. And I'm always whenever I talk to people around the world about how to do effective gentle protest, the first thing is not what craft are you going to pick up, which is often what people want to focus on first. It's what is your context? What's the power you have as an individual in your community? What's the issue you care about? What's the solution to that issue? Is it tangible? Is it realistic? Who are the decision makers involved in that? How will they listen to you? Or is it someone else that they would listen to? And you do it through that way. And then near the end is craftivism useful in this campaign? Where, how, when? So the creative part has to serve the cause and not be the taskmaster. But it is always looking at everything as on that macro level. And then I use the imagery of jigsaw pieces a lot of, you know, an issue is a whole jigsaw puzzle. Your part is one of those pieces, and there's a gap if you're not involved, whether that is on the front lines as a protester or whether that's someone who's working in the organization that you want to change. So my mum as a politician or my dad as an activist outside, we sort of needed both, you know, seeing yourself as one piece of the solution, not the whole puzzle. Because I think what's really good that you are really good at reminding us about as well is checking in with, when is our motive ego and when is it authentic joyfulness that's coming from a good place? And activism can very much slip into ego of, we need to beat these, we need to win, and I'm going to set up a global campaign to solve the climate crisis. And you're setting yourself up to fail. You're making it easy for people to discredit you and say you're only doing this for ego, not to serve the cause. So it's messy, but I think when you when you look at your own context and where you can be of use and see that there are other actions happening and where can you complement rather than compete, it changes a lot of the framework from scarcity to abundance, from
Yes.
problems to solutions, and seeing everyone as humans that can be part of the solution. And that doesn't mean, I mean, it's obviously with the elections happening, and I work all over the world. So when people are saying, well, I can't be kind and gentle to that politician that is in my constituency, I say, yes, you can. While they're a local politician representing you, you can be a critical friend to them, hold them account, be challenging, but in a loving way. You know, Martin Luther King's have a tough mind and a tender heart, but you can also know that you're going to be voting them out the next time an election happens. You can do both. It's not one or the other. You can vote someone out whilst you're still working with them while they're still in power. And I think trying to hold all of those elements is really important in activism, because otherwise what we do is exactly what you're saying, is we slip into being part of the systems and structures that we hate, and it's not good for us, and it's not good for the world.
There's so much in what you said. So I'm thinking about a chapter in my book called Choosing You, where I talk about choosing you is part of being part of the collective.
Yeah.
Because when we choose ourselves and we are self-aware, we understand what we bring, what our needs are, what our desires are, our programming, and how that impacts how we view the world and how we take up space in the world, we can then start to make powerful choices.
Yeah.
So I love what you're speaking to in terms of the jigsaw puzzle and being one tool in the activism toolkit, because my observation is that being part of this system of white supremacy, capitalism, patriarchy, is very much focused on a hero's journey.
Yeah.
So when we watch movies, there's one particular hero. I think that one of the Marvel movies, forgotten which one it was, where like literally they were all on par fighting together. There wasn't one Avenger that was like, you know, the strongest character than the other. Like, part of me wonders, is part of the appeal that it was like a collective coming together in according to the program, fighting the good fight. And the reason I bring that up is because of this hero's notion, because of this hyper individual society we grow up in and we're conditioned by, we forget I am because you are.
Yeah. Ubuntu.
You are because I am Ubuntu.
Yeah.
And there is strength in numbers, and we're not supposed to do this alone.
Yeah.
And when we recognize we're not supposed to do this alone, it's about collective action. It's about like a different pronged approach.
Yeah.
I think that we will fall out of that, as you were talking about that binary, there's the good way or there's a bad way. And we can actually start to let people show up for their part of the activism.
Exactly.
I remember when a few days after October 7th, it was in October anyway, and the conflict, which I personally, not personally because other people do, but I see as a genocide in Gaza, there were somebody, I can't remember her name, but I will find it and I'll make sure I link it to the show notes. Her name begins with D, Deepika or Deepa, and she created a model of activism. And she was basically saying there are some people who will be on the front line, that's their role. Yeah. There are some people who are healers. There are some people who are teachers. There are some people who are carers. We all have a role to play, and that all forms the ecosystem of activism, which is very important. So I'm going to come to a question. Craftivism, activism, and liberation. So what I'm hearing from you is that craftivism starts with us and also branches out to the collective.
Yeah.
And that is how our activism can support, you know, social justice ultimately is leading to liberation.
Yeah.
What does liberation mean for you, and how did that inform your craftivism?
Oh, such juicy questions.
Well, you've been given so much juiciness, I had to come back with the juice.
So for me, I mean, I was thinking about this today, the word liberation, because it's individual and it's community. And also for me, I'm always trying to flip it onto, so I read a lot of novels now of characters that are not very lovable, quite dislikable, because we know that novels are the biggest exercise for empathy, because you've got to imagine everyone and the whole environment. So it's not just watching a TV show. So I'm always thinking, well, what does a better world look like for the people I disagree with, for the people on the other side of the campaign, just as much as me? What does a solution look like for them? So it's not competing with, well, we're going to win what we want the world to look like in this particular issue, because all you're doing is getting them to get ready to fight you again. And so I'm always thinking about that. And then I was thinking about how the World Health Organization talks about how there's 3 pillars for being healthy. So, and it feels like it fits really well individually and as a society. It's about World Health Organization says well-being is being able to cope with daily stress. So it's not about big stresses like you've just lost your job or bereavement. It's just daily stresses of life. It's about trying to see that you can fulfill your potential. We can't fulfill all of our potential, but you can see that you can try and reach it. So people who are oppressed, whether it's you're on less than minimum wage, you've got 3 jobs, you're in Everton, you've got mouldy houses, or the only view you can see of a job is of a drug dealer, or if you can't see that you can fulfill your potential, that affects your physical and mental health. And the third one is contributing to society, and they're all equal. And I think for me, liberation is those equal things, is having autonomy, seeing that you can aim for fulfilling your potential with your gifts and talents and, you know, all of the unique elements of ourselves that makes us unique, but as part of a bigger world. Coping with daily stresses. So, you know, ideally, I believe that we should all have a universal basic income. That would be one of the things for liberation for me, is autonomy, is being able to have those safety nets and contributing to society, because liberation, like you said, it's all bound up in all of us. It's not, we're not on these separate little islands. So I think if they could happen, then we can flourish individually, we can flourish as a society, and that creates that freedom and that liberation that we want. And then little bits in there like liberation to be able to disagree with each other, but understand each other and accept that again, it's a spectrum and it's not black and white. For me, that's liberation of thought and, you know, free speech, but in that loving, gentle, kind way of, it's not a utopia where everyone agrees with each other. It's a messy world, but a world where we help each other flourish and feel safe and connected and can do all the weird creative stuff we might want to do.
And on the surface, I'm glad you I do love a few utopian ideals, because I think let's strive for some utopian ideals.
100%.
And on the surface, what you're saying sounds like, oh, that's easy. That's not, you know, because you're talking about being gentle, having empathy, being able to put yourself in the shoes of another, being able to be expanded enough to have conversations that challenge you.
That's all really
that is
hard.
so hard. Yeah.
So hard.
It is so easy to say you are a bad person. You're doing this. That is so easy. And it doesn't require any psychological or emotional flexibility.
Yeah. And maturity. And I think for me, what clicked with me, and when I moved to London in 2008, I was working for Christian Aid and then DFID, which was the UK Department for International Development, with different aid agencies, including Islamic Relief, and like a real mix. It was incredible. And I joined a lot of activist groups because I was like, these are my people, you know, and creative activist groups. And one of them I went with Vogue under my arm because I love reading Vogue magazine. It has good articles, beautiful images. And I was basically told to leave because it was very shallow to like fashion, and you can't like fashion and be for social change. And I thought, that's not true. I don't think that's right. And it was one group wanted to and did buy a tank to ride to the arms trade fair. And I was the only one in the group saying, what's the strategy behind this? Well, we're going to close the arms trade fair. And I said, well, you're not. You've got one tank and there's 6 entrances. And it looks like you could be for the arms trade fair or even part of the arms trade fair. And the motivation and, looking into it was and asking them difficult questions was very much a group of boys wanting to ride around in a tank. And I just thought, 1, these aren't my people. And 2, it's too easy for the people we disagree with to dismiss us because of ego, because of lack of strategy, because our vision is too utopian, so it's not realistic. So I'm always holding those 2 things in one of don't be egotistical, but also mitigate those risks of people saying, well, we can't talk to them, they're throwing milkshakes at us. And then with the new handbook I did it with a neuroscientist from MIT, Dr. Danby Kim, because I was really keen that it wasn't seen as, well, this is light and fluffy. And as a woman, very aware of the negative connotation of craft and gentleness. So all of our models, we've got a really diverse models in the book. And the neuroscientist explains a bit about each project. So it says, yes, this could be sweet to give gifts to power holders, but this fits into dopamine where you give positive surprises, not negative ones, because then that power holder, whenever they engage with you, whether it's through email or in person again, their body literally goes, oh, they gave me dopamine, I want more dopamine. So they're more likely to listen to you. Whereas if they remember you as attacking them, if it's with a milkshake or words or whatever, even if they agree with you, their body goes into fight, flight, or freeze mode to protect themselves. So it isn't a nice luxury, I think, for gentle protest. It's saying protest where possible should be non-violent, and gentle is not just non-violent, but also loving, respectful, mature, aware of your own baggage and presumptions you're bringing, because it is really effective. And yes, there is some need for those big, flashy demonstrations. I talk about how Greenpeace do really good visuals for global media, but they will tell friends of the earth, we're going to do this. Power holders won't want to talk to us because we'll be pissing them off. So we're letting you know so you can quietly engage with the politicians or the business leaders to say, we know you're annoyed with Greenpeace, but they've got a point about X, Y, and Z, and we could help you with that. So being able to say all of these things are needed is really important. And we all have our different privileges. So I'm aware of the privilege I have to be able to do this, and craft costs money. But I think when you see it as being in solidarity with others to say, okay, I've got the space and the resources to go down this angle with activism and reach new audiences, and, the capacity to engage with power holders as critical friends, that doesn't mean that people with different capacities and different privileges or lack of can't do other stuff as well. Because if you can see yourself as that jigsaw puzzle where you're in solidarity with each other, then it's much more strategic and harder to be dismissed. And I think that I'm always sort of mitigating where possible that risk of being dismissed as immature, as reactive rather than proactive. And the slow, I don't love craft, I love handicraft because it's really good for helping you channel your just anger and sadness. We should be angry and sad, but channel it into something effective, not reactive, and so you don't burn out, and so your brain can think more in a more coherent way and in a cleverer way to go, okay, what's the best thing to do in this situation?
what you're sharing reminds me of 2020, just after the murder of George Floyd, when all the black squares went up on Instagram,
Yeah,
when people were rightly very angry. So this isn't about
yeah,
the people who were protesting, etc. And what happened was a whole load of knee-jerk reactions,
yeah,
a whole load of half-baked promises that could not be sustained.
yeah,
And what we see is, when I was doing research for my book, I was astounded. Like there was Sajid Javid, who was talking about we need to end the waste of wokery or something like that, and was cancelling diversity, equity, and inclusion programs within the NHS, and lots of corporations now winding down their DE and I pro. Even in America,
yeah, yeah,
there is an organization called the Fearless Fund, where Black women have come together to be able to raise venture capitalist funding for Black women with businesses,
hmm,
because the stats are that of all the businesses that are venture capitalist funded, it's something like 7 or 4% of that funding goes to women.
yeah,
And of that, it's like 0.2% goes to Black women.
yeah.
So they set up their Fearless Fund. American politicians have misused legislation to now make the Fearless Fund illegal because it's discriminating against people who aren't Black women, as if white men and well, not white women don't really, but as if Black women raising capital to support Black women is taking away
Yeah,
from white people. So what happens is that fight, flight, freeze.
yeah.
Everybody's in panic, making short-term decisions and reacting to things, as opposed to
And it's that
creating.
scarcity mindset again, is we can't have this without someone not being able to have it as well, which just
Yeah,
doesn't make sense. I mean, I think again, I'm always trying to not have things in the black and white. So you could, look at some of my work and say, well, it's performative. And I try and mitigate those risks. And I say in the book, be aware of whether you're doing this as a performative form of activism or whether you're genuinely doing it to say, I commit to this. And all of
yeah,
my craftivism projects have craft a thought questions. So there's 3 questions for every project, and they relate to the objectives of that project. So if you're stitching a footprint for yourself, saying what impact am I having on the planet and in this society? Can it be, better for the world and for society? So while you're stitching it, it'll be questions of what are my values and how am I threading them through what I do say and think before I tell other people what to do? Can I change my energy supplier to renewable? Can I make sure that I'm aware of my unconscious bias more? Have I looked into that or not? So they're uncomfortable questions, but you're
hmm,
using the comfort of craft to be able to grapple with them so that you're not in a downward spiral, because you're using your hands in a productive way and you're using your head, hands, and heart together. Some of the projects craft a thought questions are, if I'm going to make this, so we did after the George Floyd murder, we got people doing window displays because it was also part of COVID. So
yeah,
do a window display saying Black Lives Matter with beautiful black hearts everywhere, whatever you want. But while you're doing it, look at your craft of thought questions. And I had a list of TED Talks, audiobooks to listen to. The
mm,
hearts weren't cut out black hearts. It was cut out white hearts and color them in black so that you're using mindful coloring in. So again, using all those elements together to say, and it was, a lot of my audience, it is open for everyone, but we
yeah,
all know that we attract people that look and sound like us as well.
yeah,
And I prioritize people who've never taken part in activism, are often apolitical, or don't feel that they could join other forms of activism. Sometimes it's they're housebound or they're anxious, whatever reason. But I particularly said to non-Black people, this is a project for you. This is for your neighbours. This is for you to think through. This is the homework for you to do while you're doing it, and let's share those conversations online. But if you're directly affected by this, don't take part, have a rest. This isn't
yeah,
on your shoulders.
yeah,
And some people could absolutely say, and some craftivists may have done it as a performative thing, and I will never quite know. But to try and mitigate those risks, to say, this is the project, we're doing mindful colouring in, we've got the craft of thought questions, we've got the book list for you to read, we've got the chance for you to share online what are some of the commitments you are going to make, small, big. So it wasn't reactive. And I only created the project, I think it was 5 weeks after the incident. And people were saying my silence was deafening. Why aren't you doing anything now? And it was an important opportunity to check in with my own ego, to say, why am I not doing it? To check in with everyone else, to say exactly what you said of, let's not be reactive. Let's not do shallow, quick things that we can't commit to, that burns us out. Let's be thoughtful. Let's be mindful. Let's be respectful. And let's create a project that isn't going to solve the world, but it is one tool in the toolkit. And it is a way for you to start or carry on that journey that you're on as an ally, or as a, wherever you are in the context and wherever you are in the world. And people still take part in the project now. And again, checking in with ego and checking in with motives and intentions of trying to mitigate those risks of doing it for the right reasons and not the wrong ones, and always thinking of that beloved community that you want to be part of, was really important. And I think, with social media, it feels more harmful than helpful now. I feel like we've tipped the balance in lots of ways, where people are jumping to the most negative and the most negative motives like people might have, impact, and saying you're just doing this to perform, or you're just doing this because everyone else is doing it. And that might be a case, and we should challenge each other on that. But also I feel like we should try and hope the best of people, and then challenge them, to do better if they can. But trying to be those critical friends. And I love the thing about, a loved one, when they say, I'm not angry, I'm disappointed. It's so much more impactful, because what they're saying is, you're better than this. I love you. So I'm not angry, I'm disappointed, because I know you can do better than this. And that sinks into your heart and mind much more than someone going, you're a bleep, and labeling you and writing you off or cancelling you. You're saying, I believe in you to be a better human than you are. Than what you've just done in that action that you've just taken. What's happened there? Let's help each other all, rise up and fulfill our potential, rather than write each other off or make. And if people do have the worst intentions, even by saying, I'm not angry, I'm disappointed, that can shake them up more than writing them off. So I think, I think we gotta be gentle with each other and emotionally intelligent and mature, but that doesn't mean being weak, and letting people off.
And everybody, I just want you to know that whilst I'm listening to this, in my head, I absolutely get it and it makes sense. But I'll tell you the truth. In my mind, I've gone to, if somebody is racially abusing me, if there is something like that happening, I have got no time to be compassionate and caring and curious. Most of the time, I want to make sure I'm safe and get myself out of Dodge. But the choice I make is, so a lot of my friends who work in the activist social justice space in relation to white supremacy and racism, for example, I just see them getting harmed all day long. And I am just like, when people ask me to do if I could, because the assumption is, because I talk about what I talk about, and on top of that, I'm a Black woman, that I do diversity, equity, and inclusion work. I do not, because I'm not there yet. But I am not yet in a position. And to be quite honest, people, I'm not sure if I ever will be, where I am able to debate my humanity, when I'm able to debate whether or not racism exists. I'm not interested. When I was meeting with publishers in relation to my book, I was with a publisher and I met with their PR person, and she was basically asking me, what sort of PR would I be interested in? Would I be interested in like debate type topics where I'm like, I am not going anywhere where I need to debate my humanity. That's just not going to happen, because where what's coming up for me is that as a Black person, there are so many times I have had to deny my reality and assimilate, keep myself quiet to try and keep myself safe in a situation that I would rather disengage and do something else, whether that something else is I'm disengaging, but I'm taking this to a higher person. I'm disengaging and I'm writing to my useless MP. I'm disengaging and I'm boycotting, and the boycott will be strategic. So it's not spread thin like butter. The boycott is like thick Jersey cream. So I'm feeling challenged. I'm feeling challenged.
No, but I think that's really, one, it's strategic and it's loving. So I often say, and I think because of where I grew up as well, where we would have people come in to try and save us, come in to give, here's some free shoes for your children. And we'd be thinking, people would go into debt for the shoes to go to school in, but and there was status issues around that, as lots of people understand with low income areas. But we're not taking your shoes. What we want is for you to help us get good jobs where we can afford shoes.
Yes.
And I think what I'm acutely aware of, which I think is a strength, and I think the same for you, is knowing people directly affected. And I was affected in different ways growing up where I did. But as the Vickers kids, we had very different experience. Some were better, some were worse in some ways, but it's not competing or rating those different traumas and those different experiences.
We're not doing Oppression Olympics.
We're not doing all of that, but being aware of thinking, I'm not going to be asking my Shiro in Everton and Roach, most incredible community worker in the world, holds the community together when things could be kicking off. I am never going to ask her to take part in a protest that is about something she's directly affected by, because she's surviving and she's got enough to do. And because of the trauma of her being directly affected by it, I don't want to trigger her, and I don't want her on a platform that she can be attacked. And I remember working for one big charity, as an example, a lot of sexism happening in that charity. And I thought, this person who was 3 levels above me in management, who was probably the worst and a bit of the ringleader and having effects on other people, he's not going to listen to me. Strategically, he's not going to listen to me. But also, I'm not going to put myself in that situation. I might lose my job, and it's just too much for me.
Yes.
So what I knew was the most strategic thing to do is, who does he listen to that's his peer, that he respects, and that is a fellow white man. The main guy was a gay guy, but his peer, who I knew very well, was a straight man. But I thought there's enough in common there. So I said to the other guy that I knew well, in these meetings, he's mansplaining, he's talking over people, it's ridiculous how he's ignoring women. I need you to notice it first, be aware of it, look for it, and pull him up on it in the meeting or afterwards or both, because we need allies like you to do that, because he's not going to listen to us. And I was lucky that peer of the man said, totally get it. And one, I'm shocked that I didn't notice it, and I'm so sorry. And it took a few months, maybe up to a year, where we started seeing a difference in this very sexist person, because he was listening to his peers. And a lot of the work that I do is, who are the decision makers and who do they listen to? And that's not only strategic in terms of they will listen to them more and they've got a connection anyway, whether it's about reputational risk or whether it's about making money or saving money or making power or saving power. That's, the shallow value that they'll get after making a social change positive thing is sometimes it is focused on ego or focused on external measures. But also for the people directly affected, how do we be in solidarity with them? How do we not make them undignified and not heard? And sometimes it is offering a platform, sometimes it is passing the mic, but sometimes it's also saying, this is not good for their protection and their support to say, go up on stage and do stuff. And it's not good because that power holder wrongly probably won't listen to them through the history that we've seen. So
Yeah.
it can sound, I do a lot of podcast interviews rather than written mainstream interviews, because it can be taken out of context and they oversimplify everything. So
Yes.
hopefully you won't edit this out and people take it out of context.
Well,
but being holding that nuance and holding the power dynamics and holding what's respectful for people directly affected by injustice and what's strategic for those in power, who will they listen to. We need to look at all of that quite objectively, really. And sometimes if I'm too emotionally charged by something, I know to take a step back and say, I actually can't do this, or if I'm exhausted. And it's all that, being able to examine ourselves and then see what we're bringing to the table, what's helpful, what's not helpful. But I do feel like it is good we should be sad and angry about injustice, and that can be fuel. But chronic anger doesn't work for anyone. And we know that in other parts of life. But when it comes to activism, I still find it fascinating that people seem to ignore all of what we know about how to live in a mature, healthy way in society. We sort of ignore all of that and then just go into screaming at each other and justify it. And it's not good for our own hearts as well as for other hearts. And I think that's what I try to do through my craftivism and through my gentle protest, is to say, yes, this is messy, but if we do want to make that beautiful, kind and fair world, then let's try and make our activism more beautiful, fair and kind, to be part of the system we want to be part of, and not be stuck in this drama triangle system that we know is not helping anyone.
No. What I love so much about what you have shared is that if people aren't listening to hear what you're saying, it could be dismissed as bypassy. But because you are constantly like zooming in and then zooming out for that macro picture, it has enabled you to be really strategic. So where one person might hear what you just said and said, that sounds like suppression, it's not, because your strategicness means that you are able to do things like influence law. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, one thing with all of that is I also make sure that I have a diverse group of people that I respect to say, what do you think of this campaign strategy? Is it oppressing people? Is it suppressing people? Is it labeling people? Is it the right time? And is it not? So I also make sure I have, critical friends around me, some in campaign strategy, some in politics, some, diverse audience to say, is this right, what I'm doing, or have I got a blind spot? So I think that's really important. I mean, we're changing. I wouldn't do gentle craftivism if it didn't work. And sometimes it's very much about helping people change their own personal habits or attitudes. And sometimes it's more policies and laws. So I'm really proud to say in the UK, we did a campaign that within 10 months directly led to Marks and Spencer's paying the living wage to 50,000 staff, which was, it's quite rare to say one campaign, in a linear way led to that. But when the chair of the board tells you it does, and that you see the evidence over the months of the project we did as shareholder craftivists, that really helped me see that there was value in what we do, and it's all based on positive psychology. And
can I just take a moment and say, flipping hell, that is fantastic. Congratulations. Because I'm just thinking, not only are you making a difference to those people and the income, but that's impacting their families, that's impacting their community. The ripple effect of that
and
is
the
huge.
industry.
And hopefully it's influencing exactly. It's
so one of there was many reasons to target Marks and Spencer's, and one of them was it was possible for them to do, but also that they're so influential within the sector of other companies that level. And we were working with the Living Wage Foundation and Share Action. So it was very very focused strategic campaign. And then with WWF, I created a 10-point manifesto that's basically like a checklist for people around the world to use to do strategic craftivism. And I and I work a lot with different NGO staff around the world, but I got an email saying from the staff in WWF in Spain to say, you might not realize this, but we used your manifesto, and it led to a law being changed to protect migrating birds. So my first thought was, oh, I wasn't needed. My ego had a little check of like, oh, and then I thought, this is exactly what I wanted. I'm purposefully a one-woman band. I'm not good at managing people. For the type of work I do, I need to have autonomy and flexibility. So I rely on patrons that give me £10 a month to subsidize a lot of the work I do. And I love the way I work, which might not look successful for some people, but for me, it's that freedom and autonomy. And
that's success.
When they said, that we used it as a checklist, and they have a head of campaigns who I know who's very strategic, but to be able to see the project they created and the strategy of having it outside the town hall and giving gifts to the voters going in, and the colours they used, and it was really humbling, and it was a great way to be like, yes, this can work. And it's not, I think a lot of activism, we go too big of, we want to change, we want to stop racism in the world. Well, we need to start small and build up. So Spain was changing the law, Marks and Spencer's was the living wage in the UK, but sometimes I work a lot with the Girl Guides and help them set up the craftivism badge and doing the training. And often with them, it's saying, do something in your school, and that'll give you the confidence to then doing something in your community. And then the experience to then do something maybe a bit bigger. But it's starting with tangible, realistic actions and asks, and then seeing where it takes you. But it is, what I loved about making the handbook, which is 20 projects, but also case studies, collage pages, it's full of quotes and images from people all over the world saying how the different projects and the manifesto and the ethos and the methodology has helped them in completely different ways. And some of it I can plan, like this project is to reach media who've never covered the ugly side of the fashion industry, and we did lots of that worked really well. And other times we want people to change their own habits. But to see how people fit it into their own context and sometimes create their own campaigns as well, influenced by our other ones, just reminds me about the complexities of life and how we're all unique individuals and all in different contexts, but we can make a difference. So, it's not go big or go home. And often a lot of the change, if you think, if your listeners are thinking, what changed my habits or my viewpoint on something, it's not normally a big poster or a placard. They're still helpful as nudges and reminders, but often it's someone quietly having a word with you saying, I'm not sure what you said there was right, really, or that's a big statement. Where's that come from? Or are you sure that's completely true, what you've just said about all these types of people? It's often that our loved ones quietly saying something, or it's someone we admire and we see how they live out their values, and we mirror them, and we can see representation and go, oh, that is possible. It's often those quieter, more subtle actions that can have massive ripple effects. And that keeps me going. So often our stuff is quite quiet and small and not always shareable easily on social media, but it doesn't make it less impactful.
No. And I say all the time to the people I work with, we live in the micro.
Yeah.
Our culture, the society we grow up in conditions us for intensity. So we become intensity addicts. So we think it's only the big things that matter. Yeah. But if we think about ourselves, if we think about any change that occurs, very rarely does change occur from one finite massive
Exactly.
incident. It's usually that incremental, day by day, every day, chipping away. Not even just chipping away, but
And chipping
that
away from
every
different
day.
angles. It is
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
protesting for a change in law, as well as a change in attitude, as well as
yeah,
cultural, all
yeah,
of those things. We sort of need all those angles covered.
yeah. Comes together. Oh, Sarah, I want you to start some kind of political party. I want you to follow the footsteps of your mother.
I don't
What's
think
up?
I could. And I think that's a good reminder for listeners of, I often get that. And I see my mum reading all of her reports and doing incredible scrutiny and being on the streets, knocking on doors to get people to vote. I'm an introvert who doesn't like
Okay.
conflict, who I like a bit of scrutiny, but she loves that work, and it's exhausting as well, but she loves it.
Mhm,
And I think
mhm.
seeing her do what she does, and see my dad as the local vicar, setting up a local newspaper and a films and faith course, and seeing how they use their gifts and talents and where they have joy to fuel them, has helped me navigate where I can be of best use. And I don't, at the moment, it might change. I don't think being a politician is my next step, but it might be in the future. Who knows? But I think it really is anchoring yourself in, what makes, for all the listeners, what makes me a bit unusual, whether it's the context you're brought up in or your different personality traits. I mean, I did a TED talk called Activism Needs Introverts that ended up being picked as a TED talk of the day. So it's had over 1 million views. And I didn't expect that, but I knew as an introvert that I needed to do activism differently. And it
Yeah.
was a strength. And to have people contact me every week, sometimes more often than that. And this was a few years ago. People still contacted me saying, I share your video at our school every term to different groups. I share it in the
Mhm.
workplace. I share it with our campaign supporters, because some of them need to hear that they can do activism in a different way. Like at the moment, it feels like gentle protest and the craftivism I do with the new book is my priority of where I can be a useful jigsaw piece in the puzzle. But,
Yeah.
you're very good at talking about how life is a journey, things are fluid, the seasonal elements of you do a big book and then you need a rest and then you come back planning all your podcast interviews. There's ebbs and flows, there's seasons. And I think to be flexible in being aware of yourself and that we're always changing, but always flexible of, where can I be of best use is really important. So don't
Mm.
put me in the pigeonhole of a politician yet, but who knows in the future.
I've got a bloody cheek because our Samantha Moyo, when we were speaking at the
Yeah.
Medicine Festival, asked if we had a secret dream we hadn't told anybody about, and I was like, my secret dream. Everybody else was something that was, something a bit more intimate. Mum was like, I really fancy the idea of being an MP, but that level of
Yeah.
scrutiny, the fact that I feel like my life won't be mine.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
just,
difficult.
yeah, that I
Yeah, I mean,
like autonomy.
my mum's a local councillor and has said no to being a member of parliament for similar reasons. But I
Yeah,
think it's also looking at, what support can you have around you to support you? You know, are you safe? Do you have the people around you? Can someone else do it? Or will you love doing it? If it is something that's burning in you, then don't say no. It might be that you just need to find the right people around you. And after this show, we gotta talk, because there's a few people I can put you in touch with.
oh man, I shouldn't have said anything.
I
Right, I'm going to move
know,
swiftly
no
on.
pressure, but if
No
it's
pressure.
something that's a spark in there, who knows?
Yeah, we need diverse voices,
Yeah.
thought, perspectives, and also people that will be there because they're champions for the people, not
Yes.
because they want to.
Yeah.
Like, I don't particularly want to be a politician,
But
but I
that
do
might
want
mean
to
that you're the
represent
right
people.
person to do it,
Oh man,
Tamu.
sorry. Let's move it on. Let's move it on. Let's move it on. You never know. You never know.
You never know.
So I've got some final. First of all, I could continue this because I feel like we've just scratched the surface,
Yeah.
but it is a podcast. So I have 3 questions
Yes,
that I
I'll try
ask
and be
everybody
short.
at the end. So the first one is, What is one actionable step our listeners can take today towards their own personal liberation and well-being through gentle activism?
The first thing I would tell people to do is to write down the actions they normally take each day. Just make a little list and see if they can improve on it. So activism, people think, is just going on a march, but really, your activism is, where do you put your money, where do you put your time, where do you put the interactions with human beings? So little things, like for me, it's smiling at the bus driver and saying thanks and giving eye contact, changing my energy suppliers to more ethical ones, buying ethical where I can, buying less. Just a little, what's the daily stuff you do, and can you tweak any of them? Where do you buy your breakfast? Do you do meditation? It's very tangible, it's realistic, but it's just a small thing and it reminds you of what power we do have as individuals.
Yeah, love that so much. Second, how can individuals contribute to the collective liberation and empowerment of communities using craftivism?
Well, I did create the Craftivist Collective Handbook to help you on that journey.
You should have one that you're displaying right now. Like,
it's right here.
Right in the camera. There we go.
It's 20 projects, and you literally go through it in order to help you see all of the different change you can make individually, in the community, in the global community. And then the last project shows you how to create your own campaign if you want to. So I really would encourage people to flick through it, order it from your local library, from your local bookshop, it is there as to help you on your journey as a gentle craftivist.
Wonderful. There will be a link to bookshop.org so that you can buy it from an indie. And finally, what are some systemic changes you believe are essential for achieving true liberation and equity for all?
Oh, it's such a hard one. So for me, with systemic change, and particularly in activism, because that's my world, I would love us to move from the drama triangle of victim, perpetrator, hero to the empowerment triangle of being a critical friend, being a creator, not a victim, and being in solidarity with people, not trying to be the savior. And I think if we can move from that mindset, not just in activism, but definitely in activism, I think it's very clear we're stuck in the drama triangle within activism. I think that's a game changer, really, in terms of systemic action, in terms of mindsets, to be able to move from that black and white thinking into how can we make sure everyone can be part of the solution as much as possible, knowing it can't always happen. That is often the thing that I see is the messiest part of where I work, and where people fall down, where people burn out, where people cause more polarization and division than that beloved community that we want to be part of.
You are so wise. You mentioned Girl Guides, so now I've got the image, not Girl Guides, of Brown Owl.
I've done stuff with the Scouts as well. You gotta love them.
Have you? Oh, love. So Sarah, people who want to connect with you further, who want to continue exploring your work, where's the best place for them to find you?
Well, I'm on Instagram as @craftivists and Sarah P. Corbett, because there's a few other Sarah Corbett authors, which is why the P is in there. And then I have a newsletter on the website. So yeah, just Google me and find, that sounds a little bit embarrassing, but you'll find ways to connect with me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I'll make sure they're in the show notes. Sarah, thank you so much. And everybody, we will see you. Well, I will see you next time. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining me on the Liberated Woman Podcast. Your time and attention is valued. I hope you found today's conversation insightful, inspiring, and even galvanizing. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, rate, review, subscribe, comment, and share. Like many things in our digital experience, the algorithm rules, so your interaction is vital. Your support helps me reach more listeners and attract impactful guests. Tune in for more empowering discussions and practical tips to help you live life on your own terms. Until next time, I'm Tamu Thomas, reminding you to embrace your joy. Podcast produced by me, Tamu Thomas, edited by Biongolia, podcast music by James Anderson.